Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take these critical strategic documents, the speeches, the white papers, the addresses, and we really try to distill the core intelligence.
Also, you, our listener, can get a really comprehensive understanding of the path forward for these global players.
And today, we are focusing our lens on the Caribbean, specifically the small island developing state of Antigua and Barbuda and its roadmap for 2026.
We are diving deep into the New Year's address to the nation for 2026. It was delivered by Prime Minister Gaston A. Brown right on December 31st, 2025.
And this kind of address, it's not just an annual greeting, is it?
Oh, not at all. For a small state, an address like this is it's a strategic blueprint. It lays out everything from their domestic resolve to their external diplomatic posture. It's a huge deal.
Absolutely. And that's really our mission today, isn't it? To really unpack this document.
To get into the weeds.
Exactly. We need to get a handle on the economic outlook, what's driving all this confidence they're projecting.
Right. And the diplomatic side of things, which, as we'll see, gets very sophisticated.
It really does, especially when you talk about regional solidarity, CARICOM, and then, of course, their interactions with global powers.
And tying all that back to what's happening at home, the domestic focus areas that really underpin their ambition.
It's it's a stunningly detailed case study. It's how a small island developing state, as Hesiod really plans for survival and growth in a world that's not always built for them.
And right out of the gate, the overriding message is one of intense intentionality.
Purposefully. That's the word they use.
That's the word. The nation is urged to enter the new year purposefully. And that purpose, according to the Prime Minister, it's grounded in four foundational pillars: discipline, optimism, sacrifice, and this is the critical one, collective resolve.
They're painting a pretty rosy picture.
They are. They're describing a nation entering 2026, and I'm quoting here, more confident, more hopeful, and more prosperous than at any other moment in our nation's history.
Wow. That is a staggering claim to be at a national historical peak.
It is.
And for you, the listener, this framing, it just sets up the central strategic challenge we have to analyze. How do they turn that high watermark of success into something stable, something long-term?
And the document itself gives us the mission statement. It articulates the goal as transforming success into permanence.
Let's pause on that. Success versus permanence. That feels important.
It's the philosophical backbone of the entire address. I mean, think about it. Success can be fleeting, right?
Sure. A good tourist season, a one-off investment.
Exactly. Cyclical upturns, specific short-term policy wins, but permanence. Permanence requires something much deeper.
You're talking about structural change.
Structural changes, institutional resilience, and maybe most importantly, a kind of cultural discipline that can withstand the inevitable shocks.
The external shocks that are just a fact of life for a small, open economy like theirs.
Precisely.
Okay, so that brings up a key question for me. Given that really ambitious declaration of historical prosperity, is that statement grounded in, empirical reality? Or is it more aspirational, maybe a bit of rhetoric to motivate the population?
I think it's a measured blend of both. He's definitely using the confidence from their recent performance, and we'll dig into that, to create this psychological platform for future commitment.
So by saying this is the best we've ever been,
he's raising the stakes. He's saying, look what we've achieved. Now we all have to work together to keep it. It sets a whole new standard for what's possible, and that demands a much higher level of civic engagement and political unity.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with how they view the year they just left, the source of all this confidence. So the review of 2025 is described as the year of bounty. That doesn't just suggest growth, it suggests, abundance. For an informed audience like ours, we need to know what's behind that. What's the hard evidence beyond the rhetorical flair?
Right. And the Prime Minister does ground his optimism directly in their economic performance. He points back to the national budget, to the detailed facts laid out there.
So he's saying, don't just take my word for it.
Exactly. And he's careful to frame the success not just as, big macroeconomic numbers, but as development that has actually trickled down. He highlights a people-centered economy that is gaining momentum.
Okay, people-centered, and also social progress advancing with purpose.
Mm-hmm. And that phrasing implies targeted investments. It means the money is going into things like healthcare, education, or housing. It's a direct counter to the idea that the economic expansion is only benefiting a privileged few.
That's a really crucial distinction, isn't it?
It is.
Because in so many small states that are reliant on tourism or foreign investment, you see this huge GDP growth, but it often masks these deep, deep inequalities.
Right.
So by stressing a people-centered approach, the address is basically saying, we see that problem and we are actively managing it. But how do they actually achieve this bounty?
Well, the address gives a very clear, almost a moral explanation for it. It says the nation chose hard work and smart work over fantasy.
Over fantasy. I find that phrase really instructive. What do you think that's pointing to?
I think it suggests a rejection of populist or quick fix schemes.
Things like unsustainable borrowing, maybe? Or
putting all your eggs in one basket, like relying on a single volatile sector. Hard work speaks to the effort, obviously, but smart work, that speaks to efficiency, to strategic planning.
So they're claiming their prosperity isn't just luck.
Not at all. They're saying it's rooted in a sustainable, disciplined national effort. Not luck, and not some kind of speculative policy gamble.
And that deliberate rejection of fantasy implies that maybe those quick fixes were an option, or at least a temptation that they had to actively resist.
It seems so. And this sustained, disciplined approach, it leads directly to the vague imperative for 2026, which you mentioned earlier, turning that success into permanence.
Right. If 2025 was about achieving the bounty,
then 2026 has to be about building the fortress around it. And that's where it gets difficult, because institutionalizing success, it often requires these deep, uncomfortable changes.
like what?
Reforming entrenched bureaucracies, adjusting legal frameworks, or even shifting cultural norms around work or civic duty.
And that kind of structural change always meets resistance. People get comfortable. So how does the government plan to overcome that inherent reluctance to change?
By creating what they see as an undeniable mandate for moving forward. The wisdom they cite in the address is timeless. Progress is impossible without change.
They're preparing the population for some disruption.
Absolutely. So the immediate psychological mission is to continue to defeat fear and resistance, and instead focus on achieving resilient prosperity. The government is essentially saying, look, don't let the fear of the unknown cost us the future that we've worked so hard to earn.
That phrase, resilient prosperity, that's so much stronger than just economic growth. It speaks to durability, to something that can last.
It does.
And the address argues that this resilience isn't new. It's something that's already been forged in the recent past. The road behind, as they say, tells a story of storms endured and challenges met.
This is a classic narrative strategy, but it's so important for AIDS. By reminding citizens that they successfully navigated, natural disasters, global recessions, health crises, the storms endured, they're elevating the nation's collective confidence.
It's like they're saying their national character has been developed in a pressure cooker.
That's a great way to put it. Through these specific challenges, Antigua and Barbuda has been strengthened into a vibrant and resilient nation.
It's a very powerful psychological frame.
It is.
Yeah.
Because for a Caribbean state, resilience isn't some abstract corporate buzzword.
No, it's literally surviving a Category 5 hurricane one year and an economic collapse the next.
Right. So by defining their character through successfully navigating these past difficulties, they create this mandate for continued perseverance. It suggests that the current generation is inherently stronger, better equipped for 2026 because of what they already went through.
And it also psychologically prepares them for the next set of challenges, the inevitable external shocks, which the address then immediately pivots to.
Exactly.
Right. Because no matter how disciplined or internally united they are, at the end of the day, they're a small nation. They're at the mercy of global forces. The address shifts immediately to navigating a changing world.
Acknowledging that global currents shift from time to time, creating geopolitical challenges, and these decisions made elsewhere ripple across small states such as ours. It's the geopolitical reality check.
It's the constant tension point for them, isn't it?
It's everything. Small economies are intrinsically vulnerable. They rely so heavily on imports for basic goods, for construction materials, energy, and they rely on access to large economies for tourism and financial services.
So when major powers sneeze,
small states get pneumonia. It's the classic saying, and it's true.
The address even names a specific economic challenge tied directly to the actions of a major power. It says that increased tariffs in the United States led to an escalation in global prices. Let's just pause there for a second, because that link between a distant trade war and the price of groceries in St. John's, that needs a bit of analysis for our listener.
It really does. Because when the U.S. imposes or adjusts tariffs, It fundamentally changes global supply chain costs, particularly for goods coming from, say, East Asia or Europe.
And because Antigua and Barbuda imports pretty much everything,
They're a price taker. They have no choice.
so if a tariff adds 10% to the cost of steel in the U.S. market, that cost doesn't just stay in the U.S.
Not at all. The global shippers, the manufacturers, the distributors,
Yeah.
they all pass that price increase on down the line.
For Estados, that has to be existential.
It is. They have very limited domestic production. So that ripple effect means immediate inflation hitting every single household. Higher costs for food, for the building materials they desperately need for resilience after storms, for spare parts.
So what looks like a distant trade issue is actually a direct threat to their economic stability.
And their social cohesion. The clarity in naming the U.S. action as the source of this price escalation is really noteworthy, too. It anchors this abstract global thing to a specific policy decision. It makes it less an act of God and more a political challenge to be navigated.
And that level of strategic clarity brings us to what I think is probably the most sensitive and high-stakes diplomatic challenge in the whole address.
The U.S. visa restriction issue.
Exactly. The source says recent U.S. government decisions restricted the issuance of new visas for their nationals, which understandably caused concern among our people. This is more than just economics. This is personal.
This is a genuine diplomatic flashpoint for the Antiguan and Barbudan diaspora, for citizens trying to get higher education or specialized medical care or business opportunities. Easy access to the United States is absolutely critical.
So a sudden restriction on new visas would be seen as a major downgrade in the relationship.
A huge one. It generates real anxiety and frustration among the population.
So the government can't afford to ignore this. It directly affects the morale of the very citizens the prime minister just called more prosperous than ever. How does he manage the optics and, the substance of this diplomatic hurdle?
The response is just a textbook example of crisis communication that's rooted in confidence and procedure. First, the immediate calming measure. The reassurance.
Which is?
All existing United States visas held by Antiguans and Barbudans remain valid and will be honored.
Okay, so that calms the immediate fears. If you have a visa, you're fine.
Right. It immediately narrows the problem down. It's about new visas, not a complete breakdown in the relationship.
And then comes the description of their diplomatic counteraction. They've already begun, quote, careful and constructive work to establish a system for new visas to be issued in an orderly and systematic manner.
That phrasing, careful and constructive, tells you everything about their diplomatic strategy here.
How so?
It signals maturity and restraint. They are explicitly rejecting a high-stakes public fight or retaliatory measures, which would be, futile against a superpower.
Careful implies they understand the complexity of the U.S. security concerns that probably led to this.
And constructive means they're focused on proposing solutions, not just yelling about the problem. They're positioning themselves as a reliable, process-oriented partner, not as a victim.
They're committed to engaging respectfully, persistently, and in good faith, guided by their long-standing relationship with the U.S. and their solemn duty to protect the interests of our people. But let me ask a critical question here.
Go ahead.
While this measured approach sounds very admirable, does refusing to use gripes, or anger, as they later say, does that risk sending a message of weakness? Or maybe not enough urgency to the U.S.?
And that is the central strategic tension for a small state, isn't it? They can't afford to antagonize, but they also can't afford to be ignored.
So what's the calculation?
The prime minister is banking on the long-term relationship and on institutional respect. If they resort to anger, they lose the moral high ground and could potentially jeopardize all future cooperation.
Which leads directly to how they define their own foreign policy, framed by that classic analogy. Calm seas never made a skilled sailor.
It's such a powerful metaphor for diplomatic resilience. They're basically saying that these challenges, the visa restrictions, the trade tariffs, they aren't unexpected misfortunes. They're opportunities to show off their skills.
And their strength, the source explicitly states, is found not in gripes, not in anger, and not in retreat.
But in competence, steadfast diplomacy, and resilience.
That is a profound commitment to competence as their primary diplomatic weapon.
It has to be.
It means showing up to the negotiating table with better data, with viable solutions, and sticking to the process, rather than relying on emotional appeals or threats they just can't back up.
Precisely. Competence is measurable. It's the ability to demonstrate, say, robust border control, or thorough passport security, or compliance with international financial regulations. By focusing on competence, they reframe the whole issue from "we are hurt and angry" to "we are capable partners who need an operational fix."
And that's really the only effective way for sides to deal with a global power.
It is.
Okay, so moving from their largest international partner to their immediate neighborhood, the address then focuses on our Caribbean family, CARICOM. In an environment where every small state is fighting for scarce resources and influence, this is where that pressure on regional solidarity really comes into play.
And regional relations are so incredibly nuanced. The address acknowledges that complexity right away, noting that voices may differ and choices may be made by others that we do not share.
Which is a diplomatic way of saying we don't always agree.
Exactly. It's a nod to internal disagreements, maybe over relations with non-traditional partners like China, or different internal trade policies, or how to approach global climate negotiations.
And yet they immediately follow that acknowledgement of difference with a very strong statement of respect. They emphasize honoring the sovereign right of every CARICOM member to act in its own perceived interest.
That non-interventionist stance is key to holding the bloc together. It's essential for the survival of the whole organization. If members start openly criticizing each other's sovereign policy decisions, the unity just dissolves.
But right after that respectful statement, the address pivots. It starts asserting Antigua and Barbuda's own credibility and contribution.
It does. They state, calmly and truthfully, that they have consistently contributed through trade, cooperation, advocacy, and shared sacrifice to the economic and social benefits enjoyed across our community.
Which is basically a reminder to their partners. We've paid our dues, our contributions earn us a seat at the table.
Yes, and that their commitment is a choice. They contribute not out of weakness, but out of principle and solidarity. This is so strategic. It frames their engagement as a choice made from a position of strength, not just a mandatory obligation because of where they are on the map.
And that makes their voice stronger when they're advocating for regional positions on things like debt relief or climate finance.
Absolutely. And to hammer home why they all need to stand together, the Prime Minister brings in some historical wisdom. He quotes Marcus Garvey's powerful reminder, "A people without unity are a people easily defeated."
And that explicitly links regional solidarity to their own national self-interest.
That's the ultimate strategic calculus. When you're facing these global headwinds, whether it's on tariffs, visas, or climate debt, a unified regional bloc carries exponentially more weight than any single small island ever could on its own.
The challenge, of course, is maintaining that unity.
Despite all the moments of policy strain or differing national interests. But the commitment remains steadfast to CARICOM, recognizing that small states are strongest when they stand together with dignity, with reason, and with mutual respect.
Unity is their most potent force multiplier in the international arena.
It is their ultimate insurance policy against being marginalized. They're signaling to everyone, their regional partners, and the wider world that despite any internal policy differences, when it comes to the fundamental stuff, Antigua and Barbuda will stand shoulder to shoulder with its family.
Okay, let's shift our focus now from that external environment back to the internal agenda. Section 4, the domestic imperative unity and strength beyond size. The address makes this really necessary transition from the broad policy blueprint to the granular realities of execution.
Right. The budget was people-centered, but as they correctly state, budgets alone don't build nations.
This is the moment where leadership has to bridge that gap between aspiration and reality.
It is. A budget is just numbers on a page. It's the collective will of the people, guided by a clear purpose that transforms those numbers into actual schools and hospitals and thriving businesses.
And the source gives us another critical piece of wisdom here to define that required action. Vision without action is merely a dream. Action without vision is useless.
That quote just forces accountability on both sides. The government needs to provide a clear, competent vision, and the citizens need to actually act on it.
So the burden of responsibility is shared.
Equally. The shared national task is for everyone to breathe life into that vision, to make those stated goals real in every home, every village, every community.
Which brings us to this powerful, really emotionally charged call for internal unity over division. The New Year's resolution for the citizenry is stark. They have to see themselves not as rivals, not as political tribes, not as divided camps, but as one family.
And we have to analyze why this call is so urgent for sites. I mean, in a large nation, political infighting might slow down legislation. It's annoying.
But in a small island state,
where your human capital is limited, talent pools are shallow, institutional capacity is already stretched thin, Political fragmentation is truly existential.
Explain that. How so?
Well, imagine a country of just a few 100,000 people. If your public services, say the water utility or the Ministry of Finance, are governed strictly along partisan lines, the result isn't just bureaucratic inefficiency, it's critical service failure.
Because essential public servants who are already scarce might be constantly replaced after every election.
Exactly, leading to a crippling lack of institutional memory and expertise. So those petty quarrels he talks about, they aren't just annoying, they directly undermine the state's ability to deliver clean water or mount a rapid hurricane recovery.
The language he uses to condemn that division reflects that urgency. He calls out petty quarrels, lies, deceptions, and reckless allocations that have dragged public life into the mud.
He's saying this infighting is actively stealing the national energy that should be going towards nation building. It's an appeal for national maturity.
It's a really stark choice he presents between the noise of division and the music of unity, between the smallness of individuality and greatness of collective purpose.
He's positioning partisanship as childish and detrimental, while collective purpose is the noble and essential path forward.
And the historical justification for this comes from Abraham Lincoln's warning: "A house divided against itself cannot stand."
And using that quote is so effective in this context. It signals that political division isn't just messy, it's an existential threat to the very structure of the nation.
Which leads us to the crucial analytical point of this whole domestic section, defining strength beyond the traditional metrics.
Right. The address acknowledges the harsh reality. We are a small state. We lack economies of scale and military might. They simply can't compete on sheer size or military spending.
So if military and economic might are off the table, where does their strength come from? The address makes this profound distinction between a weak state and a strong nation. What does that mean, a strong nation?
A strong nation, the document asserts, endures because its people stand together. They face their challenges with reason, not rage, with realism, not rhetoric.
So it's a cognitive strength, a behavioral strength.
Exactly. Reason and realism. That's the new definition of national power. It's about intellectual discipline in public discourse and in policymaking.
That's a complex internal psychological demand to make on your people. It's asking the citizenry and the political leaders to prioritize rational problem solving over, emotional or political grandstanding.
And that rationality, the address suggests, extends to their foreign relations as well.
How so?
It absolutely does. And this is where the domestic and foreign policy arguments just seamlessly connect. Strong nations understand that compromise is not surrender, but often the condition for reciprocity.
Okay, let's spend some time on that idea. Compromise is the condition for reciprocity. What does that practically mean for a state like Antigua and Barbuda in its dealings with, say, the U.S. on that visa issue?
It means they recognize that the U.S., when it's implementing these visa restrictions, is likely operating on its own concerns. Things related to security or the integrity of their citizenship by investment program or information sharing.
So compromise in this context isn't giving up their sovereignty.
Not at all. It's agreeing to enhance their own national systems to meet U.S. security benchmarks.
For example, agreeing to better share biometric data or tightening the due diligence on citizenship applicants.
Or investing heavily in their own domestic regulatory bodies. Precisely. The compromise is strengthening their own systems in a way that provides confidence to their partner country. You give up the right to opacity in exchange for the benefit of access.
And reciprocity means if we raise our standards to meet your security needs, you restore our access.
Right. And that requires exceptional internal coordination and political will.
And that internal coordination, that unity, is where the final, crucial strategic point of the whole address lies. Unity at home is our first line of defense abroad.
That's it. That is the ultimate summation of their entire national security policy.
It's fascinating.
It is. When the country is fragmented, it presents a weak, inconsistent face to the world. But when they are unified, politically, socially, ideologically, they have the structural strength they need to make those necessary compromises without fracturing internally, and to negotiate persistently without being easily dismissed.
So the call to unify the country and stand in solidarity isn't just a feel-good message, it's a strategic security imperative.
A complete inversion of traditional defense strategy.
Yeah.
Your internal cohesion is your primary shield and weapon against any external pressures.
Okay, let's move to Section 5, where the focus shifts from that philosophical framework to the necessary attributes of leadership and the individual contributions required to actually realize this very complex vision.
The Prime Minister spends a good amount of time here defining the responsibility of leadership, making sure the audience understands that this vision requires accountability right from the top.
Right. Leadership is explicitly defined as not being an ornament of power or privilege. It's framed as a test of spirit, commitment, and competence.
Let's unpack that triad. Spirit, commitment, and competence. Spirit sounds like moral drive, commitment is dedication, but what does competence functionally mean when you're leading SIDs?
That's a great question.
Competence here is just non-negotiable. It means bureaucratic efficiency when you have limited resources. It means financial management that maximizes the impact of every scarce dollar of foreign currency.
And given the constant threat of climate change.
Crucially, it means the demonstrated ability to execute large-scale projects like resilient infrastructure construction quickly and correctly, minimizing waste and maximizing impact. Competence is the practical application of that smart work we talked about earlier.
The address also emphasizes that the road of leadership is often lonely, and it requires the quiet courage to stand firm when it would be easier to capitulate or step aside.
That speaks to the fortitude you need when making difficult, unpopular choices, maybe imposing new regulations or making spending cuts or adhering strictly to that diplomatic line of reason, even when public opinion is demanding anger or retreat.
But the ultimate purpose remains clear.
It does. To serve the people, lift them up, empower them, mend society, and keep that flame of hope alight. It's an assertion of dedicated service over the allure of power for its own sake.
So, with that high standard for leadership, what does it demand from the ordinary citizen? The address outlines a very clear, very actionable roadmap for individual contribution. It's all under the banner of the call to civic pride and discipline.
And the overarching vision is still the same,
Yep.
Transforming the country into an economic powerhouse.
But this is where the macro vision meets the micro action.
Exactly. The transformation has to start at the most basic level of civic life. The call is specific. Elevate pride in the land. Keep your streets clean, your neighborhoods beautiful and orderly.
And what's the strategic value in that? I mean, it sounds like simple housekeeping, but the PM connects it to something deeper.
The underlying philosophical point is that how we treat our surroundings reflects how we value ourselves. In a nation that's so heavily reliant on the image of paradise for its tourism dollars, civic disorder, litter, unkempt public spaces, it's not just an aesthetic problem, it's an economic liability and a moral failure.
It connects a lack of civic order to a lack of self-respect, and by extension, a lack of national commitment.
Precisely. And beyond that environmental pride, there's a serious behavioral change required. Citizens are asked to set aside slothfulness, bitterness, hatred.
And instead adopt discipline, creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship that build nations. That's a wholesale replacement of negative social habits with productive ones.
It's a radical call for a kind of cultural reform, all aimed at fostering a dynamic economy. Slothfulness is the enemy of productivity. Bitterness and hatred are the source of the very political division they just spent an entire section condemning.
So they're asking citizens to become active economic agents.
Not passive recipients of government services. And the actions they're asking for are so actionable, so focused on human capital. Every young person is encouraged to pursue a skill or a degree. Every adult must commit to learning, to improving, to contributing to nation building.
Irrespective of political persuasion, age, color, creed, or class, it's a commitment to universal engagement and a practical meritocracy.
And this focus on skills and continuous learning is paramount for a small economy. They just cannot afford to waste a single mind or a single pair of capable hands. By stressing contribution across all those divides, they're reinforcing that unity at home mandate through economic participation.
And this commitment to merit and intentionality is reinforced by another quote. Excellence is never an accident. It is the result of intention and effort.
They are explicitly pursuing a culture of excellence in all of our endeavors, linking individual hard work directly to their national reputation and their national resilience.
And this all ties into the final segment of their domestic vision, right? Building the stakeholder society.
It does. If they are truly going to become an economic powerhouse, the source is clear. The commanding heights of the economy must rise on the strength of our own people.
Which emphasizes local economic ownership. The prosperity that's achieved has to be domestically rooted and managed.
To ensure the profits primarily benefit Antiguans and Barbudans. It's a kind of sophisticated, balanced economic nationalism.
But it's not isolationist.
Not at all. It's done in partnership with foreign investors who believe in our vision. Foreign investment is welcomed, but only when it aligns with the nation's strategic direction and its commitment to local upliftment. The goal is to maximize local control while still welcoming these synergistic partnerships.
The ultimate aim, the address concludes, is to invest all this time, all these resources and creativity into building a resilient, competitive, globally admired nation.
And the ultimate designation for this whole collective effort, the finish line, is this really powerful rhetorical device. The ultimate vision is a lifestyle superpower, a paradise for our people, first, foremost, and always.
Lifestyle superpower. I love that phrase.
It's fantastic, isn't it?
It defines success not in terms of military projection or massive industrial output, but in quality of life, environmental integrity, and national reputation.
It's a complete inversion of traditional definitions of global power. They are stating that their ultimate measure of success is the happiness, the security, and the prosperity of their own citizens.
It prioritizes the intrinsic quality of life in Antigua and Barbuda,
positioning the country as a model for sustainable, high-quality island life, admired globally for its stability and its excellence.
Okay, as we move into the outro, let's synthesize this new dispensation. The address is asking the nation to walk into the new year striving in solidarity, guided by these values of equity, hope, truth, love, and justice. It is a massive moral and strategic commitment.
And the address is so careful to make sure that hope is not misunderstood as just wishful thinking. The definition of hope they provide is crucial to the entire philosophy of the document. It is not a passive emotion.
Right. The PM makes it explicit. Hope is not passive. Hope is not a wish whispered into the wind.
Instead, hope is work. Hope is courage. Hope is the daily choice to lift each other up.
Which transforms hope from this abstract desire into a concrete daily action that reinforces that call for discipline and unity.
Which brings us to the final sweeping promise of destiny, the condition under which this unstoppable progress is guaranteed.
If the nation stands as one family, honors the land with labor, chooses unity over division, and truth over lies,
then no force on earth can hold our nation back.
That strength, that power, is defined as coming from internal self-belief and cohesion. When people walk together and believe in their own destiny,
it's the ultimate payoff for choosing that collective purpose over individual smallness. It provides a clear moral compass for all their future policy choices.
The strategic genius of this address, it seems to me, lies in its candid assessment of all these external challenges, the U.S. visa issue, the global tariffs, while at the same time framing them as tests that can only be passed through internal structural integrity.
And you just said it. A document has posited that unity at home is the nation's first line of defense abroad. And that requires strategic compromise to secure the necessary reciprocity.
That commitment to compromise and reciprocity, which we explored earlier, that really is the critical balancing act for them.
It defines their entire approach to navigating these complex international relations while they're striving for this domestic identity that's rooted in unwavering strength and principle.
And this raises a profound strategic question for you, our listener, to consider.
For a small nation that's prioritizing its internal solidarity as its foundational strength, how does it effectively balance that need for unwavering internal cohesion, the absolute necessity of unity, with the inevitable external compromises that are required to maintain global stability and economic links?
The tough one.
What limits does a strong nation, one defined by moral and civic competence rather than military might, what limits does it set on compromise before those external concessions start to erode the very internal solidarity that it relies upon?
That is the strategic challenge Antigua and Barbuda has to manage throughout 2026 and well beyond. A perfect final thought to mull over, as the success of this nation really does hinge on managing that fine line.
It really does.
Thank you for sharing your sources and taking this deep dive with us. We hope you feel thoroughly informed and ready to analyze the next steps of this resilient Caribbean nation as they pursue permanence in their prosperity.
Always a pleasure. We'll look forward to seeing how these deeply strategic intentions translate into hard action throughout the year ahead.
Until the next deep dive, be well and stay informed.